In the early 16th century, the world was still being drawn. Coastlines were uncertain. Oceans were vast blank spaces. Cartographers worked with fragments of knowledge carried by sailors who crossed waters that most people would never see. Maps were guesses shaped by rumor, exploration, and the slow accumulation of experience. And yet, in 1513, an Ottoman admiral produced a map that would quietly disturb the historical timeline. It was a fragment of parchment showing parts of Europe, Africa, and the Americas. At first glance, it seemed like another artifact from the age of exploration. But the more closely historians examined it, the more uncomfortable questions began to emerge. Some coastlines appeared surprisingly accurate. Certain geographic relationships seemed unexpectedly precise. And most intriguingly, the map claimed to be compiled from sources far older than the document itself. History does not break easily, but here it bends. Because if this map truly incorporated knowledge from earlier sources now lost, then it forces a deeper question about how geographic knowledge traveled across centuries. And this is where the contradiction begins. What if the famous voyages of the 15th century were not the first moment humanity began to understand the shape of distant continents? What if fragments of that knowledge had already existed, quietly preserved in forgotten charts and manuscripts? The Piri Reis Map does not shout its mystery. It whispers it, and the whisper has echoed for more than 500 years. To understand why this map matters, one must return to the early 16th century, a period historians often call the Age of Discovery. European powers were pushing beyond familiar waters. Portuguese ships had rounded the Cape of Good Hope. Spanish expeditions had crossed the Atlantic. The known world was expanding rapidly, but knowledge did not spread evenly. Cartographers worked with incomplete reports, sailor sketches, and speculative geography. Maps from this era often contained distorted coastlines, misplaced islands, and imaginative landmasses drawn from rumor rather than observation. Even the most respected maps of the early 1500s struggled with accuracy. The newly encountered lands of the Americas were only partially understood. The scale of continents was uncertain. The relationships between oceans and land were still emerging. And yet, within this uncertain environment, the Ottoman Empire possessed a vibrant maritime culture of its own. Ottoman navigators operated across the Mediterranean, interacting with merchants, sailors, and explorers from across Europe and North Africa. Among these sailors was a man named Piri Reis. Born around 1470, Piri Reis served as both a naval officer and a cartographer. His uncle, the famous Admiral Kemal Reis, commanded Ottoman fleets during conflicts with European powers. During these campaigns, Piri Reis encountered ships captured from rival navies, vessels that sometimes carried maps and navigational charts. These documents became a quiet archive of geographic knowledge, and over time, Piri Reis began compiling them. But here is the unsettling part. According to his own notes written directly onto the map, Piri Reis did not rely on a single source. Instead, he described assembling his chart from approximately 20 earlier maps, including Portuguese charts, Arabic geographic works, and even a map attributed to Christopher Columbus. The Piri Reis Map was not meant to be original. It was meant to be a compilation, which raises a difficult historical question. If the map reflects the knowledge of many earlier sources, then what exactly did those sources contain? The answer began to emerge slowly in the early 20th century. In 1929, while scholars were cataloging documents in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, a group of historians discovered a fragment of parchment stored among Ottoman archives. The document was weathered but remarkably well preserved. It depicted portions of the Atlantic world. The fragment showed the western coasts of Europe and Africa, along with the eastern coastline of South America. Colorful illustrations of ships and animals decorated the parchment. Written notes in Ottoman Turkish described the map sources. The discovery immediately attracted attention, because although the map itself dated to 1513, the geographic information embedded within it appeared to reach further back. The parchment measured roughly 90 by 65 centimeters and was made from gazelle skin, a material often used in high-quality manuscripts. Ink and pigments were carefully applied, suggesting the work of a skilled draftsman. but the real significance lay in the coastlines. South America, for example, appeared with surprising clarity along its northeastern coast. The relationship between Africa and South America, separated by the Atlantic, was presented with a spatial logic that reflected the growing geographic understanding of the early 16th century. And yet, there were irregularities. Certain areas seemed stretched or compressed. Some islands appeared where none exist, and the southern portion of the map, extending downward from South America, has sparked decades of debate. Some researchers initially suggested that this section might represent an early depiction of Antarctica, but most historians reject this interpretation. The shapes do not correspond convincingly to the Antarctic coastline, and the region likely reflects speculative geography typical of early cartography. Still, the conversation did not end there, because the map contains written annotations explaining its sources. Piri Reis himself wrote that he used several Portuguese charts, for maps drawn during the time of Alexander the Great, an Arab map of India, and a map attributed to Christopher Columbus. These claims cannot all be verified, but they reveal something important about how geographic knowledge circulated in the early modern world. Maps were copied, traded, captured, and modified. Knowledge moved between cultures. This is not myth. This is ink on parchment. When historians analyze the Piri Reis Map today, they see a layered document, one that reflects the merging of different mapping traditions. The Mediterranean world had long preserved classical geographic knowledge inherited from Greek scholars such as Ptolemy. Meanwhile, Islamic cartographers had produced their own detailed geographic works, including those by Al-Idrisi in the 12th century. Portuguese explorers, navigating the Atlantic coasts of Africa and South America, added new observations to this growing body of information. Piri Reis stood at the intersection of these traditions. His map was not revolutionary because it revealed unknown continents. It was significant because it captured the moment when scattered knowledge began to converge. And yet the debates continue. Some historians argue that the map's apparent accuracy reflects the rapid spread of Portuguese cartographic knowledge following their Atlantic explorations. Portuguese navigators carefully guarded their charts, but fragments inevitably circulated through trade and war. Captured maps could change hands. Information rarely stayed secret forever. Others emphasize that the Piri Reis Map demonstrates the importance of intellectual exchange between cultures. The Ottoman Empire was not isolated from European discoveries. Sailors, merchants, and diplomats moved across the Mediterranean carrying news, charts, and ideas. The map becomes evidence of a broader network of knowledge sharing. But alternative interpretations have also appeared. A few researchers have suggested that some geographic elements in the map might reflect even earlier sources, perhaps derived from medieval or classical charts that are now lost. Ancient geographic traditions, transmitted through centuries of copying, could have contributed fragments of older knowledge. This possibility remains difficult to prove. Maps are rarely pure creations. They are accumulations. Every line on a map is the result of earlier observations, earlier drawings, earlier assumptions. And this is where the deeper significance of the Piri Reis Map begins to emerge. It reminds us that history is not a sequence of sudden discoveries made in isolation. It is a chain. A Portuguese navigator records a coastline. An Arab geographer copies a Greek text. An Ottoman admiral captures a European ship carrying charts. A cartographer assembles fragments into a new image of the world. Knowledge travels, and sometimes it survives in unexpected places. The Piri Reis Map itself is only a fragment of a larger chart that once extended further north. Much of the original work has been lost. What remains is only a portion of the world as Piri Reis drew it. But that fragment has endured long enough to raise enduring questions. Not questions of hidden civilizations or lost continents, but quieter questions about how knowledge moves through time. Because the map demonstrates something subtle but powerful. The understanding of the world did not emerge fully formed during the Age of Discovery. It was built gradually through centuries of observation, copying, translation, and exchange. The Piri Reis Map sits precisely at that turning point. Behind it stand older traditions of geography stretching back through medieval Islamic scholarship and classical Greek science. Ahead of it lies the modern era of global cartography. Between those two worlds, this map holds a fragile bridge, and perhaps that is the true mystery it presents. Not a secret hidden within its coastlines, but a reminder that human knowledge rarely disappears entirely. Even when maps are lost, even when manuscripts vanish, fragments survive. A chart copied from another chart, a note scribbled in the margin of a manuscript, a captured map stored in an archive.
It matches the 17th
Centuries later,
century's celestial
someone
charts.
unfolds the parchment again, and suddenly the past speaks. The Piri Reis Map does not overturn history. It does something quieter. It reveals how history actually works. History does not break easily, but sometimes through documents like this, we can see the subtle places where it bends.